there's one of the things that you said that is very important to underline in terms of what we call feminist leadership. And it goes to the myth of flower girls or people who are, I think it's the other side of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Where we have women, or the tokenism, where we have women who are put in positions because a gap or the quota needed to be checked.
Yeah.
And the question of competency comes into question.
Yes.
And so even for other women who are coming in that space, then their competency is challenged or questioned.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think it is. I feel like it is one of the things that women leaders have to come up with, is that you have to upscale your CV, going for certifications.
Yeah.
But it's also that when you push a younger woman in the generation of mentorship or something, one of the things that I feel like is important, and I know people are gifted differently, is competency. So that the people who are closing the gaps are also, I don't want to say have a standard, but I think there should be competency.
Yeah.
So that you're well for the job.
Yeah.
So that we're not pushed away because, we gave a woman a job, or we gave that young girl a job, and it was not nicely done.
Affirmative action is important because we do need to recognize that we have quite a big disparity in gender opportunities, access to basic amenities. We do know men are more prone to getting better chances, even in education. When you think of even before COVID, 560 million people were out of school globally, and a big chunk of them were unfortunately on the African continent, and majority of them were adolescent girls. Even if we know poverty is something that we're dealing with as a continent, we do know it affects girls and women adversely than men and boys.
Disappropriately, yes.
And when affirmative action was being put at the fore, it was I still believe in affirmative action because I think it's important to make sure that the playing ground is not the same.
No,
it's important to make sure that you're not giving men and boys like 1,000 head start, and girls and women are struggling. And even on their track, they have so many challenges to overcome, and you call this an equal race. I do think affirmative action is trying to help recognize that. But in the same vein, it's really important to make sure you're not putting women just on the basis that they're a woman in this position, because then it completely takes back all the gains other women have, even the movement itself. I think it's important to make sure, as much as we still have affirmative action, we need to make sure that women who are competent and qualified for those roles are being given those spaces, because you're not just giving me a role because I'm a woman. That's, I think, the worst thing we're doing in this space, by just giving people just because of their gender.
That is true.
I think it's important to make sure that they have the bare minimum qualifications to make sure that they're moving whatever space of influence forward. So I think affirmative action, we need to rethink what that is. Even in spaces when you think about boards, don't just give people a position because they're a person who are able differently. They have to come with, like, I think this thing is we completely massacring, and I think that's where the spaces where they say affirmative action should not exist, because then we're just giving people, just by mere fact that either they are able differently, or they're women, or they're from marginalized communities. I think those are important things for us to think about in equity and equality.
Yes.
But we have to be measuring them against something else, because then it becomes a completely different narrative of why are we giving more women positions in government, for example. Are we giving them because solely they're women? And the bigger question is, like, what returns are they doing then for women and girls? If you can't be able to see any progress they've made, then there's a problem with that policy.
As we speak about affirmative action and having women in quotas, I think one of the things that I would want us to go back to is what we mean by feminist leadership, because I think feminist leadership is not necessarily, because it's something you've asked about, you said about are the women that are chosen or are representing contributing to the gains of women and girls, right? And so I think one of the things that I would love our audience to understand is what we mean by feminist leadership, because it's not necessarily the leadership of a woman.
Yeah, absolutely. So feminist leadership is, first of all, recognizing the patriarchal structures and questioning how those structures oppress women and girls more than they do men and boys. So it's really making sure that we have equity and equality in pursuits of our opportunities, pursuits of our education, etc. So feminist leadership is that leadership that is questioning those structures, trying to dismantle them,
Yes.
but beyond just questioning them, trying to make sure that you're not only just talking, but you're acting. So that's what feminist leadership, in my view, is. It's making sure that as much as you're cognizant that there are all these barriers that girls and women face more than boys and men, you're also making sure that you're making it easier for them to overcome them. When you think about that tied with affirmative action, I do believe, and I hope in our lifetime, we will affirmative action, because in my mind, it should not exist in and itself or on its own. I do believe that hopefully in our generation, we will see men and boys, girls and women have equal opportunity, and therefore things like the quota system will be something of the past.
Yes.
But until then, it's important to make sure that we recognize there are so many barriers girls and women have faced. That's why even in university, you'll notice that there are different quotas in the cutoff point, because we do know most girls will probably really, really struggle getting into school because of cultural norms. If you have boys, you have brothers, and you come from a economically disempowered community or family background. So we do know, even in this country in 2021, that there's some families that will opt to take the boy to school than the girl. If the girl gets into school, again, there are all these challenges. She might get pregnant, she might be sold off as an early forced bride. There are many challenges we have to recognize for her to have gotten to university, then to be able to now get into the workspace. We have to be cognizant of these struggles that she's gotten till here.
Yeah, that's
recognize the gains she's made, but also not say just because you're here, it's an equal play. It is not.
No.
So I do think feminist leadership is really trying to make sure that all those struggles and challenges and hurdles that girls and women have to face have been taken away, but also making sure that we are paying it forward. So it means feminist leadership, again, in my view, is not things that other people can do. I keep saying, what can you do for
in your own
a
space.
girl, a woman, even in the workspace? Is it mentoring someone? Is it helping be a guide? Is it looking at someone's CV that has just finished campus? That's what feminist leadership is, because we know we need to be able to hold doors open. We need to help girls and women be able to jump those hoops that we have so many to do. So that's what feminist leadership. We don't have to say it's other people, it's Usawa doing, she's the first. No, it's what can you do as an individual that you're trying, because you recognize the struggle. How do you make sure that girls and women don't have to go to that struggle to the degree or extent that you did?
That is true. And I think on a macro level, one of the things that I find difficult is merging or marrying representation of women and allocation of resources. Because I find that countries will come up and say, oh, but we have this percentage of women representatives.
Yeah.
But then when you look at the national budgeting, the women or young girls' specific needs are not catered for, and this, I don't think we see how that affects our budgets, in terms of how budgets are allocated. Because if in an area, as you said earlier, there's no water, so and girls and women have to walk a long distance to fetch water, which by social norms, women take care of the home. So it will be very hard for the girl to go to school because she has to go help her mom, go fetch water and firewood, or take care of kids. The same if family planning and other SHR services are not taken into a village. The most likely girls have to drop off school so that they can help the mom take care of the family. And also in towns or in the corporate space, it's also the same. In terms of if you don't have lactation facilities or things like those, then it becomes that women cannot catch up. Or if another one of the things that I think we hope to talk about in Swaiba is even how information in the workplace is managed. You realize that most trainings are designed for travel away from home. So when you travel away from home, it means that for women who has a younger family, most likely she will be hesitant to take the opportunity because she has to take care of her family. And so you say, but you don't have the certification. But the access for it was not really made because it was supposed to be a country away
Yeah.
and have a young family.
Yeah.
So then women are almost punished by the system. Women and girls are almost punished by the systems when we don't acknowledge the gender specific or the women specific needs.
True.
And I think we need to start having these conversations
Yeah.
so that when we say equality or equity,
Yeah.
we are pointing to specific things other than just saying things,
Just a blanket, that's completely accurate. And I know people use this as a buzzword when they say gender mainstreaming. That's really like what you've just hit the nail when you say, yes, to devolve government, yes, to making sure amenities are reaching grassroots organizations or grassroots people in different sectors. But if we don't have more voices or we don't have more inclusive people in those committees, in those policy decision-making spaces, then it's very hard for people who don't really know these challenges. And I don't know if it's they don't know, they're just not aware, or they're not really, it's not a problem for them. Then it becomes really hard for them to really understand why it's important to make sure that, schools have feeding programs, schools have clean toilets. Before COVID, like sanitation is one of the things we've been struggling with in schools. Like disposable places for girls to be able to dispose sanitary towels. That right now, COVID is because it's affecting everyone. That's why we're thinking about it becomes a priority. But it's really important to make sure that we have qualified women in these spaces to make that connection, because it looks, from where I sit, it does not look very apparent to, unfortunately, some of our decision makers, why some of these things, it's important to recognize that if I don't have running water or I don't have electricity, it's more likely that this girl is going to be spending so much time doing domestic chores than her brother. And if she goes to class and she's tired, you can already see the correlation between, the drop-off rates of girls in school, or even just the performance. Because I'm coming into this space, but I'm coming here with so many other lived experiences that my other classmates may or may not be going through, especially the boys, that I'm so tired I can't really listen to my teacher when they're telling me about, I don't know, matrix or calculus.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to make those connections and recognize that these issues that girls and women face are not just girls and women's issues. It affects
the productivity of a whole.
So it has to be something of concern. That is, just because I'm not a woman, I'm not a mother, or I should not feel like this is a problem of others. There's one very Kenyan quote people say that really irritates me when people say, I'll change when I get a daughter or I get a wife. I'm like, that is such a bizarre way to think.
Yeah.
But if just because you don't have a wife or a child, that will not automatically change just because you get. These are things that should be of concern to all of us, regardless of what our family situation is.
Which brings me to one of the things that I think is very contested in social conversations. Like if you're sitting in a club or sitting in a conversation with friends, and you ask the role of fathers in terms of empowering girls, you hear different things, in terms of what men think women can do, and what they think their daughters can do. But I'm like, there's no difference. I mean, if your daughter sees you treat other women like this, it sends a message, and that's socialization. So what's your take in the role of men?
As I mentioned, again, it's how we're socialized is very, very different. I grew up in a family of only girls, and my father used to be in the army. So there are things I do, or there are things me and my sisters know how to do, which people, both girls and boys, will be like taken aback. Like I remember he taught us how to drive a stick shift, I think when I was maybe 9, 10, 11.
Oh, wow.
We change tires, we change bulbs.
Oh, you
like we are self-efficient, we're self-sufficient human beings.
Oh, good for you.
But I do think it's important for you, even just how we socialize girls and boys is very different. And I noticed, like, even when you see mothers in a playing field and they have a boy and a girl, you'll notice we'll really limit the girl. Like if she falls down, we're all rushing to her. We're telling her, have you hurt yourself? Yeah. If the boy falls down, no one even notices. Like he could be screaming for help, like he's broken some tendons or something.
Yeah.
And no one is. But I think those small things, and I think that's why men probably deal with rejection better than women, even in the workspace. Like if you apply for something and you don't get it, like I will take like 3 weeks to be like, I can't believe they rejected me. But I think a dude will just be like, oh, they didn't, moving along.
Yeah.
But I think that's one thing I really want to unlearn, because we grew up being so safe, like we're so protected, but the guys were doing crazy, dangerous things, almost suicidal, but no one was really concerned of them. And I think this is, again, mothers who do it more than, I don't know how dudes are when they're with their daughters versus their son. I think there's also that level of extra protection.
That's true.
But I think we do it with love, but I think it's really harmful, because then we don't know how to be uncomfortable. You know, when you're sharing experiences about even taking a position, a training opportunity abroad, or not even abroad, let's just talk about in the country, a different county. You've been told, go for this mission for X number of days. Men don't even think about it. They're just like, oh, it's here, I'm going. But women, we are so reserved. And I think it's how we were taught.
Yeah.
So I do think both men and women play a role in how they raise their children. Like, I want to be very intentional to tell my nephew, like, when we went to see, it's not Wakanda, I think it is Wakanda. So he's 10 years old, and he says, you know, I really liked the show, but there were too many women heroes. He said the same thing with Wonder Woman. And I want him to know that it's okay for a woman to thrive and a man to thrive.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, I was very intentional to make sure that he's seen other superheroes who are not like what he conforms to.
Yeah.
And I think that's something both men and women, aunties, uncles, we should be intentional to raise children for each of them to realize their full potential. And I think it's easier said than done, because even when I see my nieces falling down, I want to rush and hug her.
Yes.
But I'm just like, no, I'm practicing my feminism. She's not crying. If you look away, she'll like dust herself off and move on.
And I think it's the opposite conversation which we will have about, you know, men and, you know, emotional management in terms of, you know, I mean, do they allow themselves to grieve? Do they allow themselves to feel? And how that contributes in terms of the workspace aggression.
Yeah.
But when we shared about, if you remember my cousin, Clarence, he's 16. When he was in school, it was a mixed school, and a girl had beat him, and he couldn't take it. he couldn't take it. He was done, and every time he didn't have a problem with the boys who were ahead of him.
Yeah,
but between the boys, there was a girl, and it was so hard for the man to take it. He was like, you'd say, do you know how bad it feels to be defeated by a woman? And what it took me aback, because he's been raised by very strong women, you know.
Yeah.
And I tell you, it's a conversation that we have to keep on, but I guess you get them when they're young.
Yeah.
And it's that there's a time my niece, she's pre. She said she wants to be a firefighter.
Wow.
And you should have seen the look on the
everybody's
grandfathers.
like,
no, give her a doll, something softer.
Yeah.
You know, and it's that she has decided firefighting is what she wants to do with herself, at least at 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's allowing her to interpret her world in her sense.
And that's one thing I keep trying to think back. When did I know, because I was a woman, there are things I shouldn't do? Because I think children are very innocent, and I keep saying we should learn to let that child in us be. Because, like, if you ask a child, what do you want? They know off the bat. But when you ask an adult, male or female, what do you want? It reaches a certain age where we want to say things that we think are culturally or societal appropriate. So and women, I think for men, they learn how to expand, and women will learn how to shrink. And I keep saying, I don't know at what age we learn that, because
I think it's when we say, sorry, start short, I think it's socialization. There's a way rewards and punishments are structured.
That's true.
So therefore, women and girls are punished, I put that in quotes, for being outstanding, for being powerful. You might not be whipped or anything, but the words that will come after you acting like a man, you're too abrasive, you don't ever get married, you know. And for boys, he's a natural leader. You can be a president, you know, and they might perhaps be doing the same thing. So I think society has a way, and even in the workspace, in a boardroom, one of my friends was telling us how she felt punished every time she was too visible.
Oh, wow.
You know, like she would be left out in meetings that were important.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think we uphold, I don't know what age even, I don't know, but I think there's an age that comes and children start learning the reward punishment system, depending on your gender. And I think prolonged, if you don't get outside that space, and that's why I think feminist safe spaces are very important, is that you never get out of it.
Yeah. And I think genuine feminist spaces, because I do know people who identify as being feminists, but their actions are screaming something completely different.
That is true.
And I'm a firm believer that if your light is shining, it does not in any way diminish my light.
Yeah.
In fact, it actually makes the space better.
Brighter.
Because then, and going back to the conversation earlier about being the only woman in a boardroom, how much more better if I know Nyambura is in this boardroom, you're going through these different struggles, and I can be able to ask you and bounce back ideas with you on how you navigate in this space. Like you're multitasking all these different roles that women have. I think it's so important to make sure that we are not only cheering people on, but also holding each other accountable. Because I think that's one thing in some feminist spaces I've seen, there's no accountability. Like I know how you can be really, really being mean to your intern, but because you're a feminist, I feel like I can't call you out. And I don't believe in that kind of feminist. I think with feminism, there's also accountability. And if you cannot handle those two, then we have a problem there. And I do think it's really important to know that this is not just a cool club. It's for us to, because I do think when you talk about patriarchy, we sometimes believe that it's only been perpetuated by men, but I do know women can be perpetuating the same.
That's true.
And that's why it's really important to hold feminists and other women accountable at the same time.
But you and I could speak about this for the rest of our lives, you know, which means that we should have more teas than we have had.
We should.
But you tell me, I mean, we've spoken about a lot of things, you know, but tell me, if you were to look at, you know, closing the gaps for girls and women, what would be your boldest solution?
At an individual level, it's continuously mentoring other women and girls along my own journey, because through that process, you keep knowing, you keep growing, and you keep going. And I think, you know, people think just because you're mentoring someone, you're helping this person, but through that journey, I also learn. I am also really in touch with realities of what other women and girls are experiencing. So I think on an individual level, it's been intentional. It costs you nothing to, you know, extend an olive branch to someone and lift them up, because I think I am where I am because I stood literally on the shoulders of giants of women, including some of my family and other women who didn't know me, who completely had no obligation, but the fact that they took a chance on me, something that I am indebted to, and I think it's important to pay it forward for other girls and women. In terms of, you know, when you think about like our policies, I think it's also making sure that if you are in a place of influence, first of all, you know, pat yourself on the shoulder, because then we know the struggle was real for you to get into that space, but not to be complacent and not to be mediocre. You really need to make sure you keep pushing the envelope further. If you see inequalities in the spaces that you're working in, I know there's fear, and I think feminist leadership especially calls for us to be courageous, because doing the right thing is not always the easiest thing. And I think that's a fallacy. We're always told by our parents, do the right thing.
Yeah.
When you go into some spaces, you're like, hey, doing the right thing can actually get me fired.
That is true.
But I think it's important to make sure that if you see things and you don't question them, especially where the things that are tearing women down, if you don't say anything, I lump you in the same place as the person, the perpetrator.